Transfer $200,000 to my crypto wallet by noon tomorrow, or I tell Nia you hired a woman to trap me. I have the fake text messages ready and she will believe me because she thinks you are a jealous old man. I did not tremble. I did not beg. I just reached into my jacket pocket and touched the cold metal of a device he never knew I carried. But before I unleash the storm that would destroy his life, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your family from a wolf in sheep's clothing. My name is Reginald Carter, but everyone calls me Reggie. I am 70 years old, and tonight I was supposed to be the invisible man. The engagement party was held in a penthouse in Manhattan, overlooking the dark expanse of Central Park. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. My daughter Nia looked like a queen in her cream silk dress, holding a glass of champagne and laughing at a joke I could not hear. She was glowing with a happiness that terrified me because I knew how fragile it was. I stood near the buffet table nursing a glass of ginger ale. I do not drink alcohol. Not anymore. Not since the job. I wore my best Sunday suit, a charcoal gray number I bought 10 years ago at a discount store. It was clean and pressed, but the cuffs were fraying slightly at the edges. Around me, men in $5,000 custom tuxedos and women dripping in diamonds clinked crystal glasses. To them, I was just a stain on the pristine white tablecloth of their evening. I was the relic from the past. The old black father from the suburbs who fixed lawnmowers and tended his garden. A waiter passed me 3 times with a tray of hors d'oeuvres without stopping. He looked right through me. I did not mind. In my line of work, being invisible was a superpower. It allowed you to watch. And I was watching everything. I saw how the guests smiled with their teeth, but not their eyes. I saw how they assessed the cost of the furniture and the brand of the wine. But mostly I watched Blake Sterling. He was 32 years old, with blonde hair slicked back and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He worked in fintech, or crypto, or whatever buzzword was being used to print money out of thin air this week. He was the golden boy. He moved through the crowd like a shark in a tank of guppies, shaking hands and slapping backs. He was charming. He was successful. And he was a lie. He spotted me in the corner. For a second, his mask slipped. A flash of annoyance crossed his face, as if he had found a piece of gum on the sole of his Italian leather shoe. But then the smile returned. He walked over to me, his movement fluid and predatory. He put an arm around my shoulder, squeezing just a little too hard. To the room, it looked like a bonding moment, a loving son-in-law honoring his elder. "Reggie," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, "you look great. You look having a good time." I nodded slowly. "It is a beautiful party, Blake. Thank you for inviting me." He laughed, a sound that lacked any real warmth. "Of course, Reggie. You are family. Hey, let us grab some fresh air. The view from the balcony is killer." He guided me toward the glass doors. I felt the tension in his grip. His fingers dug into my deltoid muscle. We stepped out onto the terrace. The noise of the party faded behind the heavy glass, replaced by the hum of the city below. The wind was cold. It bit through the thin fabric of my suit. Blake walked to the edge and looked down at the street 40 stories below. Then he turned to me. The smile was gone. His face was a mask of cold, hard calculation. "We need to talk about the wedding gift, Reggie," he said. I frowned. I already gave Nia the quilt her mother sewed before she passed. "And the savings bond." Blake rolled his eyes. "A quilt. Jesus. That is touching, really. But we are adults here. I know you have money stashed away. Nia told me you sold that piece of land in Georgia last year. You are sitting on cash." I stared at him. That money was my entire retirement. It was the safety net for my old age and for Nia if she ever needed it. "That is not for spending, Blake. That is for emergencies." "This is an emergency," he hissed, stepping closer. He invaded my personal space, towering over me. He smelled of scotch and mints. "I need a bridge loan, just a short-term injection of liquidity, $200,000. I looked him in the eye. "No." His face twisted. It was ugly. The handsome features contorted into a sneer of pure malice. "You do not get it, do you, old man? I am not asking. You are going to transfer $200,000 to my cold wallet address. I will text you the code. You have until noon tomorrow. And if I do not," I asked, my voice steady. He leaned down so his mouth was inches from my ear. "If you do not, I tell Nia you hired a woman to seduce me. I have a girl lined up. I have fake text messages generated on a burner phone. I have photos of you withdrawing cash from the bank which I will say was to pay her." He pulled back, smiling cruelly. "Nia already thinks you are jealous of my success. She thinks you are bitter because a white man is taking care of her better than you ever could. She thinks you are just an old, prejudiced relic. If I show her that evidence, she will cut you out of her life forever. You will never see your future grandchildren. You will die alone in that sad little house." He waited for me to crumble. He expected the old mechanic to cry, to beg, to tremble in fear of losing his only daughter. He expected me to be weak. I looked at him. I did not blink. I took a slow sip of my warm ginger ale. "Is that all I asked?" Blake looked confused for a second, then he laughed. "You think I am joking? Try me, Reggie. Noon tomorrow. Do not test me." He patted my cheek. A light, disrespectful tap, like one would pet a dog. Then he turned and walked back inside, instantly transforming back into the charming groom laughing with a group of investors near the bar. I stood alone on the balcony, gripping the cold railing. My knuckles did not turn white. My hands were steady. Blake Sterling made a critical error, a fatal error. He judged the book by its cover. He saw an old black man in a cheap suit with calloused hands and assumed I was simple. He assumed I was slow. He assumed I was helpless. He did not know who I was before I retired. He did not know that for 25 years I was not a mechanic. I was a forensic accountant for the Bureau. I spent 2 decades hunting men exactly like him. Men who thought a suit and a smile could hide a Ponzi scheme. Men who thought they were smarter than the numbers. I had tracked money through shell companies in Panama and diamond mines in Sierra Leone. I had sat across interrogation tables from cartel bosses and corrupt senators. I watched him through the glass. I did not see a successful businessman. I saw a desperate amateur. I analyzed him the way I used to analyze a target. His pupils were dilated despite the bright lights of the chandeliers. Stimulants, probably cocaine to handle the stress. His jugular vein was pulsing at a rate of at least 110 beats per minute. He was sweating at the temples, wiping it away quickly with a handkerchief. He was not investing. He was drowning. A man does not extort his father-in-law for $200,000 on his engagement night unless he has a gun to his head. He needed that money to plug a hole, a massive hole. I reached into my pocket and touched the small audio recorder I always carried. Old habits die hard. I had clicked it on the moment he put his arm around my shoulder. I had his threat. I had his demand. But audio was not enough. Not for Nia. She was in love. Love makes you deaf. Love makes you blind. If I played this for her now, she would claim it was taken out of context or that he was drunk. Or worse, she would believe his lie about the AI voice generation. He had already planted the seeds of doubt in her mind, turning her against me. No. To take down a man like Blake Sterling, I could not just wound him. I had to obliterate him. I had to follow the money. I finished my ginger ale and set the glass on the railing. The wind howled around the building, a mournful sound. "You want to play a game, Blake?" I whispered to the glass. "You just challenged the man who wrote the rule book." I adjusted my tie, smoothed the fraying cuffs of my jacket, and opened the door. I walked back into the party, my face a mask of defeat and submission. I needed him to think he had won. I needed him arrogant, because an arrogant man makes mistakes, and I would be there to catch every single one of them. Tomorrow at noon, he expected a transfer. What he was going to get was a war. The drive back to Queens was a blur of red taillights and rain streaking across the windshield of my 10-year-old sedan. I kept the radio off. The silence helped me think, but the silence did not last long. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, vibrating against the worn leather. The screen flashed with the name Nia. I stared at it for a moment, letting it ring. I knew what was coming. Blake had not wasted a single second. He had gotten to her first, just as I predicted. I pressed the answer button and put it on speaker. Before I could even say hello, my daughter's voice filled the small car, sharp and accusing. "Daddy, how could you?" Her voice cracked on the last word. It was the sound of a woman who was humiliated, not angry. That hurt worse. "Nia, baby, listen to me." I started, keeping my eyes on the wet road. "No, you listen," she cut me off. "Blake just told me everything. He told me you cornered him on the balcony. He told me you threatened to cut me out of the will if he married me. He said you called him a gold digger." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The lie was clever. It mixed a grain of truth with a mountain of fabrication. He took the tension that was already there and twisted it until it snapped. "He is lying, Nia," I said, my voice low and steady. "I never said those things." "Stop it, just stop lying," she screamed. She was crying now. "I know you hate him, Daddy. I know you think he is too flashy. I know you think he does not understand our culture, but he loves me. He treats me like a princess. Why can't you just be happy for me? Why do you have to be so bitter just because you are alone?" That struck a nerve. She knew exactly where to aim. Since her mother died, I had been a ghost in my own life, living only for her. "He is manipulating you, Nia. He is not who you think he is. You are the one manipulating people," she sobbed. "Blake said you were probably going to deny it. He said you would try to gaslight me. He was literally shaking when he came back inside Daddy. He was terrified of you. I never want to see you like this again. Do not come to the brunch tomorrow. I need space." The line went dead. I did not call back. There was no point. She was under his spell. He had successfully painted me as the angry, jealous father and himself as the victim. It was a classic romance scam tactic. Isolate the target. Demonize the support system. Make the victim feel like the scammer is the only person they can trust. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark. It was a modest 2-story brick building, the same house I had bought 30 years ago. To the neighbors, I was just the quiet old man who kept his lawn manicured and waved when they walked their dogs. They saw a retiree. They saw a widower. They had no idea what slept inside those walls. I walked inside and locked the door, engaging all 3 deadbolts. I hung up my wet coat. The house smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I walked straight to the study at the back of the house. It was lined with bookshelves filled with encyclopedias and gardening manuals. I went to the heavy oak desk in the corner. I did not sit down. Instead, I knelt on the floor and pulled back the corner of the rug. Underneath was a floor safe installed into the foundation. I spun the dial left, right, left. The mechanism clicked, a heavy, satisfying sound of precision engineering. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, there was no money. There were no jewels. There was only a black, ruggedized laptop case and a set of external hard drives labeled with years going back 2 decades. I lifted the case onto the desk. It was heavy. This was not a consumer machine. It was a decommissioned field unit I had managed to keep when I left the bureau. It was air-gapped, meaning it never connected to the internet unless I told it to. It had no camera, it had no microphone, it was a ghost machine. I plugged it in and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life with a stark green command prompt. No windows, no icons, just code. I typed in my encryption key, a 40-character string I had memorized 15 years ago. The system unlocked. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and took out a pair of reading glasses. I put them on and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The tired old man was gone. In his place was Special Agent Carter. I might have been retired, but the skills were burned into my muscle memory. I knew how to follow a paper trail through a hurricane. I reached into the safe again and pulled out a specialized modem. I connected it to the laptop. I was not going to use my home internet connection. That was for amateurs. This modem bounced my signal through 3 different servers in Estonia, Panama, and Singapore. If Blake or anyone else tried to trace me, they would end up chasing their tails on the other side of the world. I sat down the leather chair, groaning under my weight. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to go to work. Blake wanted a transfer. I was going to give him an audit. I pulled the slip of paper from my pocket where I had written down the wallet address Blake had flashed at me. It was a QR code, but my photographic memory had caught the alphanumeric string below it. I typed the string into the tracking software. Enter. The screen filled with data. Lines of code cascaded down like green rain. The software began to crawl through the blockchain. Crypto was supposed to be anonymous. That was the sales pitch. But that was a lie criminals told themselves to sleep at night. Nothing is truly anonymous. Every transaction leaves a footprint. You just have to know how to look for the mud. I watched the lines connect. The wallet Blake gave me was not a personal storage wallet. It was an intake wallet. It was fresh, created only 3 days ago. That was sloppy. A professional uses an aged wallet to avoid flagging algorithms. I ran a query on the wallet's connections. It was empty now, but it was linked to a cluster of other addresses. I commanded the software to follow the chain. Trace upstream. The software worked its magic. It bypassed the basic mixers Blake used. He was using a cheap tumbling service, probably something he found on a forum. It was like trying to hide a tank under a bedsheet. I stripped away the layers of obfuscation in 5 minutes. The trail led to a massive central wallet. I recognized the signature immediately. It was not an investment firm. It was not a bank. It was a known hot wallet associated with an offshore sports betting syndicate based in Costa Rica. I sat back and exhaled slowly. The picture was coming into focus. Blake Sterling was not building a crypto empire. He was a gambler, and not a good one. I queried the transaction volume of the syndicate's wallet, looking for incoming payments from Blake's known aliases, which Sarah had dug up for me earlier. There it was. A pattern of hemorrhaging money. 50,000 here, 20,000 there, all outgoing, all losses. But then the pattern stopped abruptly 2 weeks ago. The betting syndicate had cut him off. That meant he was in debt. Deep debt. I looked at the amount he demanded from me. $200,000. That was a specific number. In the world of illegal gambling, round numbers usually meant a settlement figure, a buy-in for your life. He wasn't trying to get rich off me. He was trying to stop someone from breaking his legs, or worse. I typed another command, pulling up his credit report on a separate window. It was a sea of red, maxed out cards, personal loans with predatory interest rates. He was insolvent. He was drowning. And tomorrow at noon, the sharks were coming to collect. This made him desperate. A desperate man is dangerous. He would not stop at threats. If I did not pay, he would escalate. He would hurt Nia to get to the money. He would burn down everything around him to save his own skin. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. I had 9 hours before his deadline. I leaned forward, the blue light of the screen illuminating the deep lines in my face. I had found the motive. Now I needed the smoking gun. I needed to prove he was stealing from Nia, not just lying to her. I opened a new terminal window. I was going to do something illegal. I was going to cross a line I had respected for 40 years. But looking at the data, looking at the precipice my daughter was standing on, I did not care. I began to type the code to bypass the firewall of Nia's company server. I needed to see her books. If Blake was this deep in the hole, he hadn't just tapped me. He had likely tapped her too. The cursor blinked, waiting for my command. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, thinking of the oath I once swore. Then I thought of Blake's hand on my shoulder, his breath in my ear. I hit enter. The war had begun. The sun was barely up when the pounding started on my front door. It was not a polite knock. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of a fist demanding entry. I knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. I had spent the last 4 hours tracking his financial footprint across the dark web, and now the man himself was on my porch. I shuffled to the door wearing my old plaid bathrobe and worn slippers. I made sure to hunch my shoulders slightly. I let my hands tremble just enough to be noticeable. I opened the door. Blake stood there wearing a crisp navy jogging suit that probably cost more than my car. He was smiling. It was a bright plastic smile because my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, was watering her hydrangeas just 10 feet away. "Good morning, Reggie Blake," boomed his voice full of false cheer. "Just wanted to check on my favorite father-in-law. I brought you some coffee." He held up a cardboard carrier from a high-end cafe. Mrs. Higgins waved from her yard, beaming at the scene. She saw a devoted young man caring for an elder. She did not see the vein throbbing in Blake's temple or the way his eyes were scanning the interior of my house like a predator looking for a weakness. "Come in," I said, my voice raspy. The moment the door clicked shut, the smile vanished. It dropped off his face so fast it was unsettling. He didn't hand me the coffee. He dropped it on my hallway floor. The cups burst, sending hot brown liquid splashing across the hardwood I had polished for 30 years. "Oops," he sneered. "Clean that up, old man." He didn't wait for a reaction. He pushed past me into the living room. He began to pace his energy, frantic and manic. He picked up a framed photo of Nia from her graduation and looked at it with disdain before tossing it onto the sofa. He opened the drawers of my side table, dumping the contents onto the rug. Old bills, pens, a magnifying glass. He kicked through the pile with his sneaker. "Look at this junk," he spat. "You live like a rat, Reggie. This place smells like dust and failure. How did Nia turn out so perfect coming from this? It is a biological miracle." He turned on me, closing the distance. "Do you have it?" I leaned against the wall, clutching the lapels of my robe. I forced my eyes to widen in fear. I let my lower lip quiver. It was a performance I had perfected in undercover stings in the 80s. The terrified informant, the helpless victim. It fed the ego of the aggressor. and a man with a fed ego is a man with a loose tongue. Blake, I stammered. It is Sunday. The banks are closed. I cannot move that kind of money so fast. I need time. Please. I have to sell the land in Georgia first. Liar, he shouted. He grabbed a ceramic bowl from the mantel, a piece Beatrice had painted, and smashed it against the fireplace. It shattered into 100 pieces. Do not lie to me. Nia said you have savings. You have a pension. Transfer it. Use your phone. Do it now. I sank into my armchair, appearing to collapse under the pressure. I held my head in my hands. I do not know how to use the crypto apps, I whined. I am old Blake. I am confused. Why do you need it by noon? Can it wait until after the wedding? I can give you more if you wait. I can get a loan against the house next week. I was using a technique called reverse interrogation. By offering a better deal in the future, I was forcing him to explain why the present was so critical. I was playing the role of the helpful but incompetent ally. Next week is too late, he screamed. He was losing control. He ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up. He looked wild. Why, I asked softly, looking up at him with watery eyes. Is it the wedding costs? I can pay the caterer directly. No, you stupid old fool, it is not the caterer, it is the books. He stopped, breathing heavily. He realized he was shouting, but he was too worked up to stop. He needed to vent. He needed to explain his genius to the idiot in the room. I moved some things around, okay, he said, pacing again. I leveraged some assets from Nia's company to cover a short position. It was supposed to be a sure thing, a quick flip. But the market turned. He looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate. The auditors are coming on Tuesday, Reggie. Tuesday. If that hole in the balance sheet isn't plugged by tomorrow morning, I am done. Nia is done. We go to prison. Do you want your daughter visiting her husband through glass? There it was. The confession. He wasn't just gambling his own money. He had embezzled funds from my daughter's company, and the clock was ticking down to a corporate audit. He needed my $200,000 to replace what he had stolen before the suits arrived to check the ledgers. I kept my face mask of terror intact, but inside I was celebrating. This was the specific detail I needed. General threats were one thing. Admitting to corporate embezzlement and a cover-up timeline was a federal crime. I don't have the money today, Blake, I whispered. I really don't. He stared at me with pure hatred. Then he leaned down, his face inches from mine. Find it. Sell this dump. Pawn your wife's jewelry. I don't care. If that wallet is empty at noon, I am sending those texts to Nia. I will break her heart, Reggie, and I will make sure she knows it was your fault. He straightened up and adjusted his jacket. Noon, he said. He walked to the door, stepping over the puddle of coffee without looking back. He opened the door and the plastic smile reappeared instantly for the benefit of the street. He walked to his Porsche, waved to Mrs. Higgins, and drove away. I sat in the armchair for a full minute after the sound of his engine faded. Then I stood up. I did not struggle to rise. My knees did not pop. I stood up straight, my posture aligning into the military bearing I had carried for 40 years. I walked to the hallway and stepped over the coffee. I would clean that up later. I went to the bookshelf and pulled out a small black device that had been wedged between two encyclopedias. It was a high-fidelity directional microphone and recorder. I pressed the playback button. Blake's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. I leveraged some assets from Nia's company. The auditors are coming on Tuesday. If that hole isn't plugged, we go to prison. I stopped the recording. A cold, humorless smile touched my lips. You are right about one thing, Blake, I said to the empty room. Someone is going to prison. But it won't be Nia. I looked at the shattered bowl in the fireplace. That was Beatrice's favorite. He would pay for that too, with interest. I went back to my study. I had the motive. I had the confession. Now I needed to close the net. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Sarah, I said when the line connected. I have a job, and you are going to want to bring your badge. I sat in a corner booth at the Bluebird Diner on Northern Boulevard. It was a place where time stood still. The vinyl seats were cracked and the coffee tasted like battery acid, but it was quiet. It was 11 in the morning. I had been there for 20 minutes. In my line of work, early is on time and on time is late. I watched the door. At 11 sharp, the bell above the entrance chimed. Sarah O'Malley walked in. She did not look like a private investigator. She looked like a tired soccer mom in a beige trench coat and running shoes. That was her gift. She could blend into a PTA meeting or a crime scene with equal ease. We had worked together in the Financial Crimes Division for 10 years. She was the best researcher the Bureau ever had. She could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who manufactured the steel for the needle. She spotted me and walked over. She did not smile. She did not offer a hug. She slid into the booth opposite me and placed a heavy manila envelope on the table. She signaled the waitress for coffee with a subtle nod. "You look like hell, Reggie," she said, her voice low and raspy from years of smoking. "I feel like hell, Sarah. Did you find it?" She tapped the envelope with a manicured fingernail. "I found everything. You were right about the crypto wallet. It is a washing machine for gambling debts, but that is the least of your problems. This guy isn't just a degenerate gambler, Reggie. He is a ghost." I looked at the envelope. My hand hovered over it. I knew that once I opened it, there was no going back. I would not just be investigating a bad son-in-law. I would be investigating a predator. "How bad is it?" I asked. Sarah took a sip of the coffee the waitress had just poured. She looked me dead in the eye. "He does not exist, Reggie. Blake Sterling was born 3 years ago in Miami. Before that, he was Brandon Siles in Chicago. And before that, he was Brett St. James in Seattle." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Multiple aliases meant a career criminal. It meant premeditation. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of photos and police reports. I picked up the first photo. It was a mugshot from Chicago. The man looked younger. His hair was darker, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, dead, fraud, embezzlement, romance scams. Sarah pointed to a document near the bottom of the stack. "Look at the pattern, Reggie. It is always the same. He targets successful professional women, usually women who are independent or slightly older than him. He plays the role of the perfect partner, the attentive listener, the ambitious entrepreneur. He gets them to fall in love. He isolates them from their families. And then the financial emergencies start." I read the report. A doctor in Chicago lost $300,000. She thought she was investing in a medical tech startup. He vanished a week before the wedding. She lost her practice. She lost her home. I flipped to the next page. A lawyer in Seattle. She signed over power of attorney so he could manage her portfolio while she was recovering from surgery. He liquidated everything. Stocks, bonds, retirement accounts. He left her with zero balance and a maxed-out credit line. "He is a vampire," Sarah said. "He drains them dry and moves on to the next host. Nia is just the next meal ticket." I stared at the photo of Blake smiling at a gala with the Chicago doctor. He looked exactly the way he looked at Nia last night. Adoring, devoted. It was all a performance, a script he had rehearsed on a dozen other women. "My daughter is in love with a character," I whispered. "A character written to destroy her." Sarah leaned forward. "It gets worse, Reggie. I ran a deep dive on his current financials. I wanted to see how deep the hole was. He owes the syndicate way more than $200,000. That is just the interest payment. He needs a big score to buy his freedom." I looked at the timeline. The wedding was in 4 days. Once they were married, he would have legal access to her assets. He wouldn't need to ask for transfers. He could just take it. "He is not going to wait until the wedding," I said, realizing the urgency. "He is desperate now. The auditors are coming on Tuesday." Sarah nodded grimly. "That is why I checked Nia's accounts. I have a friend at the bank. I called in a favor." She pulled out a single sheet of paper from her coat pocket. It was a transaction log printed an hour ago. She slid it across the greasy table. "Look at the last entry," she said. I looked. My heart stopped. Dated yesterday. A wire transfer. $50,000. From Nia Carter Personal Savings to Blake Sterling. The memo line read, "Investment in our future." I felt like I had been punched in the chest. $50,000. That was the money Nia had saved for 5 years. That was the money for her first house. The money she worked overtime for. The money she sacrificed weekends and holidays to earn. "He already tapped her," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "He told me he hadn't. He lied." "Of course he lied," Sarah said. "He is bleeding her, Reggie. He is testing the waters. 50,000 was the test. If she sent that without asking questions, he knows he can take the rest." I looked at the date stamp. She sent it an hour before the engagement party, an hour before he cornered me on the balcony. He had taken her money, looked her in the face, told her he loved her, and then walked outside to extort her father for more. He had no bottom. There was no line he would not cross. I clenched my fist, crumpling the paper slightly. The image of Nia's trusting face flashed in my mind. She thought she was building an empire with a partner. She was actually digging her own grave with a shovel he sold her. I have to tell her, I said, standing up. I have to show her this file. Sarah reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was strong. Sit down, Reggie, think. You go to her now with a file of old mugshots and she will not believe you. He has already inoculated her against you. He told her you were jealous. He told her you would try to sabotage him. If you show her this, she will think you forged it. She will think you are desperate to destroy her happiness. I sat back down heavily. Sarah was right. Nia was in the denial phase. Facts would look like attacks. Evidence would look like fabrication. Blake had built a fortress of lies around her mind. So what do? I asked. Do I just watch him bankrupt my daughter? No. Sarah set her eyes hard. We do not watch. We participate. You said he demanded $200,000. Yes. Then give it to him. I looked at her shocked. What? Not the money, Sarah said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. Give him the hope of money. He is desperate, Reggie. Desperation makes a man blind. He thinks you are a weak old man. Play the role. Lure him out. Make him feel safe. And then when his guard is down, we catch him doing something he cannot explain away. I looked at the transaction log again. $50,000. My daughter's hard work. Stolen by a parasite in a suit. I felt a shift inside me. The sadness evaporated. The fear vanished. All that was left was cold, sharp clarity. I picked up the phone. I dialed Blake's number. Sarah watched me. What are you doing? She asked. I am setting the trap, I said. The phone rang twice. Blake answered. Do you have my money, old man? He asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. I let my voice crack. I let the fear seep into my tone. Blake, I said, I cannot do the transfer. The bank is asking too many questions. I heard him inhale sharply, ready to explode, but I continued quickly. I have something better. I have cash. I called in a favor from a friend in the old neighborhood. I have $100,000 in cash right now. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him thinking. Cash was dangerous. But cash was also untraceable. Cash was immediate. 100,000, he repeated. That is only half. It is all I could get on a Sunday, I pleaded. I can get the rest next week, but this will hold off the auditors, right? He hesitated. He was greedy. And greed is a hook that never fails to set. Where are you? He asked. I am at the old storage facility on Industrial Way, I said. Unit 42. I keep my tools there. Come alone, Blake, please. I do not want Nia to know. I will be there in 20 minutes, he said. And Reggie, if you are playing games, I will burn your life to the ground. He hung up. I looked at Sarah. She was already pulling a small black pistol from her ankle holster and checking the chamber. Let us go, she said. I stood up and buttoned my coat. I touched the hidden camera button on my shirt, ensuring it was active. You wanted a transfer, Blake, I thought. You are about to get a withdrawal, and the fees are going to be exorbitant. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Unit 42. It sounded like 1,000 drumbeats heralding a coming execution. I sat on a plastic crate in the center of the empty storage locker. The air smelled of damp concrete and old motor oil. It was the smell of my past, the smell of evidence lockers and interrogation rooms. My hands rested on my knees. They were steady. On the floor in front of me sat a black canvas duffel bag. It looked heavy. It looked full. I checked my watch. It had been 20 minutes since I made the call. The lie had tasted sweet on my tongue. I told him I had $100,000 in cash. I told him I had called in favors from the old neighborhood. I told him I was terrified. It was the perfect bait for a man like Blake. A man drowning in debt does not question a lifeline, he just grabs it. He did not ask where an old retired mechanic got that much liquid cash on a Sunday. He did not ask why I chose a storage unit. His greed was a roaring fire that consumed his logic. I adjusted the collar of my shirt. The button camera was a tiny speck of black plastic indistinguishable from a standard fastener. It was recording in 4K resolution with a wide-angle lens. I tapped the small earpiece deep in my left ear canal. "Sarah, are you reading me?" I whispered. "Loud and clear, Reggie," she replied, her voice tinny but reassuring. "I am in the van around the corner. I have eyes on the entrance. If he twitches the wrong way, I am coming in." "Stay back, Sarah," I said. "I need him to feel dominant. I need him to commit. If you show up too early, he claims self-defense. He claims he was scared. I need him to be the aggressor." I heard the sound of a high-performance engine growling outside. It was a sound that did not belong in this industrial wasteland of rusted trucks and forklifts. Tires crunched on gravel. A car door slammed. "He is here," Sarah said. "He is alone." I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I practiced the face of a defeated father. I was not Reggie the federal agent anymore. I was Reggie the helpless old man. The metal roll-up door was open a few feet from the ground. Blake ducked under it. He stood up and brushed the dust off the shoulders of his Italian jacket. He looked around the dim space, his nose wrinkling in disgust. The single overhead bulb cast long, sharp shadows across his face. He looked manic. His eyes were wide and darting. He was vibrating with adrenaline and cocaine. "Where is it?" he barked, his voice echoing off the metal walls. I pointed to the bag on the floor. "It is all there, Blake," I said, my voice trembling just enough. 100,000. Small bills. Untraceable. Just like you wanted. He walked toward the bag, but he did not pick it up immediately. Instead, he reached into the waistband of his trousers. My eyes tracked the movement. He pulled out a gun. It was a chrome-plated pistol, flashy and loud, just like him. He leveled it at my chest. I flinched, raising my hands. "Blake, you do not need that," I pleaded. "I brought the money. We had a deal." He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "A deal? You think we are partners, Reggie. We are not partners. You are a resource, and I am the one mining you." He kept the gun trained on me as he knelt down and unzipped the bag. He saw the stacks of bills. I had placed $5,000 in real currency on top. Beneath them were cut bundles of newspapers sized to match. It was the oldest trick in the book, but in bad lighting with a gun in your hand, you do not count every bill. You see what you want to see. He zipped the bag shut and stood up, slinging the heavy strap over his shoulder. He looked at me with a sneer that twisted his handsome face into something demonic. "You know," he said, stepping closer, the gun still pointed at my heart. "I almost feel sorry for you. You spent your whole life saving pennies, fixing engines, getting grease under your fingernails. And for what? So I could take it in 5 minutes." He was close now. Too close. I could smell the expensive cologne masking the scent of sweat and fear. "Please, Blake," I said. "Just take the money and leave Nia out of this. Do not tell her about the loan. Do not ruin her wedding." He pistol-whipped the air, a gesture of pure arrogance. "Nia is an idiot," he spat. "She thinks I am some financial genius. She has no idea I am using her credit to keep the lights on. And you know the best part, Reggie. Even after I spend every dime of this, she will still marry me, because I am her dream. And you are just her embarrassing past." He leaned in the barrel of the gun inches from my nose. "You are nothing but a sad old man," he whispered. "You think you can buy me off. This is just a down payment. After the wedding, I am going to sell your house. I am going to put you in a state-run home, and I am going to make sure you rot there." He had given me everything. The weapon, the threat, the confession of future intent. The camera on my chest saw it all. The microphone caught every syllable. It was time for the payment. I looked him in the eye. I dropped the act for a fraction of a second. "You are making a mistake, Blake," I said, my voice dropping an octave. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said you are making a mistake." He did not like that. He did not like the sudden steel in my voice. He reacted with the only language a bully understands. Violence. He pulled back his fist, the one holding the heavy bag of money, and swung it. It was a clumsy telegraphed blow. I could have blocked it. I could have disarmed him in 2 moves, but I didn't. I needed the assault. I needed the injury. The heavy canvas bag hit me in the side of the head. The impact was jarring. I grunted and fell to the concrete floor. The taste of copper filled my mouth. My vision swam for a second. He did not stop there. He kicked me in the ribs. Hard. "Stay down, old man," he shouted. "Stay down and die." He stood over me, panting. He looked at his hand, checking his knuckles. He looked at me lying in the dust, clutching my side. He felt powerful. He felt invincible. He turned and walked to the door, ducking under the metal sheet. I heard his footsteps crunching on the gravel, fading away. I heard the Porsche engine roar to life. I lay there for a moment, listening to the silence return to Unit 42. My head throbbed. My ribs ached. But inside I was cold, calm ice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote for the camera. I stopped the recording. Reggie Sarah's voice screamed in my ear. "I am coming in. I am calling the paramedics. No ambulance." I groaned, sitting up slowly. I wiped the blood from my lip. I need to look like this. I need Nia to see this. I stood up, swaying slightly. I checked the camera file. It was perfect. The gun, the threat, the assault, the admission of embezzlement. It was a straight flush. I walked to the entrance of the storage unit. The rain felt good on my bruised face. "You got the license plate?" I asked into the comms. "Got it," Sarah said. "And I got him leaving with the bag. He is holding the evidence of his own extortion." "Good," I said. "Let him run. Let him think he won." I looked at the gray sky. "He thinks I am history," I whispered. "He is about to learn that history is written by the winners. And I just wrote his obituary." I limped toward Sarah's van. We had work to do. The wedding was in 48 hours, and I had a speech to prepare. Sarah pulled the van up to the curb outside Nia's apartment building on the Upper West Side. It was a pre-war building with a doorman and a marble lobby, the kind of place that screamed old New York money. I looked in the rearview mirror. My face was a mess. My left eye was swollen shut, turning a shade of angry purple. My lip was split and dried blood crusted my chin. I looked like a man who had lost a fight in an alley, which was exactly what I needed to be. I did not clean up. I did not ice the swelling. I wanted the brutality to be undeniable. I wanted Nia to see the violence written on my skin. "Wait here, Sarah," I said, my voice thick from the swelling. I limped past the doorman, who looked ready to call the police, until I flashed my ID. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through my ribs. I held my side, nursing the bruising where Blake had kicked me. I knocked on Nia's door. I did not pound. I knocked gently, like a father who was tired. She opened the door wearing a silk robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked fresh and clean, a stark contrast to the wreck standing in her hallway. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Daddy," she gasped. "Oh my God. What happened to you? You look terrible." She reached out instinctively but stopped herself. The wall was still there. The anger from the night before was still simmering beneath her shock. "Blake happened. Nia," I said, stepping into the apartment. She backed away, shaking her head. No, he is at the gym. He texted me an hour ago." "He is not at the gym," I said, closing the door behind me. "He was at a storage unit in Queens. He demanded money, Nia. He demanded $100,000 in cash. And when I gave it to him, he beat me. He kicked me while I was on the ground." "You are lying," she whispered, backing into the living room. "Blake is not violent. He is gentle. He is a businessman. He is a criminal," I said, my voice rising. "He stole $50,000 from you, Nia. I know about the transfer. And he has embezzled money from your company accounts." I reached into my pocket. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the physical toll of the assault. I pulled out the small digital recorder. I had the video on the button camera, but I kept that in reserve. I needed to see if she would believe his voice first. If I showed her the video of me handing him fake money, she might focus on my deception rather than his violence. I needed to guide her to the truth, one step at a time. "Listen," I said, pressing play. Blake's voice filled the chic apartment, clear and undeniable. "Nia is an idiot. She thinks I am some financial genius. She has no idea I am using her credit to keep the lights on." I watched her face. I expected horror. I expected tears. I expected her to run into my arms and apologize. Instead, her face went blank. Her eyes hardened. She stared at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. "Even after I spend every dime of this, she will still marry me, because I am her dream. And you are just her embarrassing past." The recording ended. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. I looked at her, pleading with my one good eye. "Do you hear him, baby? He does not love you. He is using you." He admitted it. Nia let out a breath, a long, shaky exhale. Then she looked up at me. Her expression broke my heart. It was not the look of a daughter realizing she was safe. It was the look of a daughter looking at a monster. "He told me you would do this," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. What I asked confused. "He told me last night. He sat me down and he cried, 'Daddy.' He told me he was afraid you were going to try to frame him. He said you have friends in intelligence. He said you have access to technology." She walked over to the counter and picked up her phone. She held it up like a shield. "He told me about deepfake AI," she said. "He said you can take a 3-second clip of anyone's voice and make them say anything. He played me a podcast about it. He warned me that you were so desperate to break us up that you would manufacture evidence." I stared at her, stunned. Blake was smarter than I thought. He had inoculated her. He had planted the defense before the attack even happened. He knew I would record him. He counted on it. "Nia, that is his voice. That is not a computer. Look at my face. Did a computer give me this black eye?" "You probably hired someone to hit you," she screamed, losing her composure. "Or you did it yourself. That is how sick you are. You are obsessed with destroying my happiness because you are miserable." She paced the room, her hands flying in the air. "You cannot stand that I am marrying a white man who is successful. You cannot stand that he has a future and you only have a past. You are jealous, Daddy. You are a bitter, jealous old man who wants to drag me down into your misery." I felt like I had been kicked in the ribs again. This time the pain was internal. "Nia, look at the facts. Look at your bank account." I checked my account, she yelled. The $50,000 was an investment. Blake showed me the portfolio. "It is already up 20%. He showed me the dashboard on his laptop. It was a fake dashboard, a simulation. It was the oldest trick in the digital book. But to her it was real because she wanted it to be real. "Please, baby," I whispered. "He is going to ruin you. The auditors are coming on Tuesday." "Get out," she said, pointing to the door. "Nia, get out," she screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. You are not welcome at the wedding. If you show up, I will have security throw you out. I never want to see you again." I stood there for a moment looking at the stranger who wore my daughter's face. She was shaking with rage, protecting the predator who was eating her alive. I realized then that words were useless. Logic was useless. Love was useless against this level of manipulation. I turned and walked to the door. I did not look back. I could hear her sobbing as I closed the heavy wood door behind me. I took the elevator down. I walked past the doorman who averted his gaze. I stepped out onto the street. It had started to rain again. A cold, gray New York drizzle that soaked into my cheap suit and stung the open cut on my lip. I stood on the sidewalk looking up at her window. I felt a profound hollowness in my chest. It was the feeling of total failure. I had failed to protect her. I had failed to raise her with enough skepticism to see through a man like Blake. I had failed her mother, who made me promise to keep her safe. But as the cold rain ran down my neck, the hollowness began to fill. It filled with a cold, dark resolve. I was done playing the concerned father. I was done trying to warn her. You cannot warn a person who is asleep. You have to wake them up. And sometimes the only way to wake someone up is to burn the house down around them. Sarah pulled the van up to the curb. She rolled down the window. She saw my face. She saw the defeat in my posture. "He got to her first, didn't he?" she asked softly. I nodded. "She thinks I used AI. She thinks I did this to myself." Sarah sighed. "The denial phase. It is powerful." She unlocked the door. "Get in, Reggie. We have 48 hours. What is the plan?" I opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat. I wiped the water from my face. I touched the bruise on my cheek. It throbbed a steady drumbeat of pain that sharpened my focus. "The plan has changed, Sarah," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "We are not going to stop the wedding," I said, staring at the dashboard. Sarah looked at me confused. "We aren't." "No," I said. "We are going to let it start. We are going to let him stand at that altar. We are going to let him think he has won everything. We are going to let him get to the very edge of victory." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive containing the camera footage, the financial records, the police reports, and the transaction logs. "I am not going to warn her anymore," I said. "I am going to destroy him. Publicly, irrevocably. I am going to nuke his life in front of everyone he tried to impress." I looked at Sarah. "Call the team. I want the security detail. I want the hacker. And get me the floor plan for the wedding venue." Sarah smiled a grim, dangerous smile. You want to crash the party. I shook my head. No, I am not crashing the party. I am going to be the main event. Drive Sarah. We have a war to win. I sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's van as we idled under the gray sky. The rain drummed a relentless rhythm on the roof, a sound that usually calmed me, but now felt like a ticking clock. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message. I knew who it was before I looked. Only one person would be arrogant enough to spike the football while the game was still being played. It was Blake. Nice black eye old man. I hope it hurts. Just so you know, Nia is currently crying on my shoulder. She is apologizing to me for your behavior. She is begging me not to call the police on you. I stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated the swelling on my face in the rearview mirror. He was not done. Another message popped up. You lost Reggie. You tried to play the tough guy, and you lost your daughter. And just to be clear about the terms of your surrender, here is what is going to happen next. After the wedding, I am taking power of attorney over your assets. Nia will sign off on it because she thinks you are losing your mind. We are going to sell that ugly brick house of yours. The proceeds will fund our honeymoon in Europe. Or maybe I will just buy a new car. And you are going to Shady Pines. I already looked up the rates. It is a dump, but it is all you can afford now. I read the message twice. My hand tightened around the phone until the case creaked. It was not the insult that got to me. It was the absolute certainty in his tone. He truly believed he was untouchable. He believed he had maneuvered me into a corner from which there was no escape. He admitted it all. The manipulation, the theft of my home, the plan to institutionalize me. He sent it in a text because he thought no one would believe me anyway. He thought I was a toothless lion. But arrogance is a blinding light. It makes you see only what you want to see. He saw a broken old man. He did not see the recorder running on my phone capturing the metadata of his texts. He did not see the fire he had just poured gasoline on. He wants to take my house, I said quietly, showing the screen to Sarah. He wants to use the sale to fund his getaway. Sarah glanced at the text and her jaw tightened. He is a sociopath, she said. He enjoys this. It is not just about the money anymore. He gets off on the cruelty. I put the phone in my pocket. That is his weakness, I said. He thinks he is playing with a mouse. He does not realize he just walked into a cage with a tiger. Sarah pulled a laptop from the back seat and set it on the center console. She began typing furiously, her fingers a blur. While you were getting your face rearranged, I ran a trace on his travel documents, she said. I flagged his passport number in the travel databases. If he booked a flight anywhere in the world, I wanted to know. She hit enter and spun the laptop toward me. Got him, she said. I looked at the screen. A flight itinerary. Cayman Airways Flight 702. Departs JFK at 11:30 p.m. on Sunday night. That was the night of the wedding. I scanned the passenger list. One name. Blake Sterling. Seat 1A. First class. Where is Nia? I asked, scanning the list again, hoping to see her name. She is not there, Sarah said softly. It is a one-way ticket, Reggie. Just him. The picture was complete. The audit at Nia's company was scheduled for Tuesday. Blake knew he could not plug the hole in the accounts. He never intended to pay it back. He never intended to marry her and live happily ever after. The wedding was a smokescreen. It was a final cash grab. He would collect the wedding gifts. He would drain her accounts. He would take the money from me if he could get it, and then he would vanish into the tropical night, leaving my daughter with a broken heart, a bankrupt company, and a federal investigation. He is running, I said. He is cutting and running. He has 48 hours, Sarah said. If we do not stop him at that wedding, he disappears. And once he is in the Caymans with crypto, good luck getting him back. I looked at the time. It was Friday afternoon. The banks would close in 2 hours. I need money, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. I need a lot of money, Reggie, Sarah warned. You can't liquidate your pension. That is everything you have. If I do not do this, Nia loses everything I said. She goes to jail for his crimes. I am not letting that happen. I got out of the van and walked into the bank branch on the corner. I walked to the manager's office. I did not have time for tellers. I demanded a wire transfer. I liquidated my IRA. I cashed out my life insurance policy. I emptied my savings. I pulled every cent I had accumulated over 40 years of government service. It was a terrifying amount of money to hold in a single cashier's check, but I did not hesitate. This was war financing. I walked back to the van and handed the check to Sarah. $150,000, I said. That is my war chest. Sarah looked at the check and whistled low. You are all in. I am all in, I repeated. Now make the calls. I want the A team. We drove to an industrial loft in Brooklyn. It was a discreet location used by private security contractors. I had rented it for the weekend. It would be our command center. Sarah had made the calls. When we walked in, 3 men were already waiting. First was Jackson. He was a former Navy SEAL I had worked with on a joint task force in Yemen. He was 6'4" and built like a tank. He specialized in physical security and extraction. He saw my face and frowned. Rough night. Reggie Jackson asked, his voice a deep rumble. Work hazard, I replied, shaking his hand. Next to him was Chen, a former NSA analyst who got bored with government bureaucracy and went freelance. He was young, barely 30, with messy hair and a hoodie. He was typing on 3 keyboards at once. He could hack a pacemaker from a mile away. And finally, there was Miller. He was ex-Secret Service. He knew how to secure a venue, how to spot a threat in a crowd, and how to take down a target without anyone noticing until the handcuffs were on. I stood at the head of the table. I placed the flash drive with the evidence in the center. Gentlemen, I said, thank you for coming on short notice. The target is Blake Sterling. He is a con artist, a thief, and he assaulted a federal agent, me. I projected Blake's photo onto the wall. He is marrying my daughter in 48 hours, I continued. He plans to steal her money, ruin her company, and flee the country. We are not going to let that happen. Jackson cracked his knuckles. You want us to grab him, Reggie? We can snatch him tonight. He will never make it to the altar. I shook my head. No. A snatch and grab is too messy. Nia will think he was kidnapped. She will mourn him. She will think I was responsible. I need her to see him for what he is. I need the world to see him. I looked at Chen. Can you get into the venue's AV system, I asked. Chen didn't even look up from his screens. I am already in. It is a wireless system controlled by a central server in the basement. I have root access. I can control the lights, the sound, the microphones, and the projection screens. Good, I said. I want you to prepare a presentation. I'm going to give you audio files, video footage, and financial documents. I want them queued up to play on every screen in that ballroom on my command. Chen nodded, a wicked smile spreading across his face. You want a multimedia roast? I can do that. I turned to Miller and Jackson. You two are my detail. Blake has hired private security for the wedding. Thugs in cheap suits. I need you to neutralize them. Non-lethal, but decisive. When I make my move, they are going to try to stop me. Do not let them. Miller nodded. We will secure the perimeter. No one touches you, Reggie. I looked at the map of the wedding venue Sarah had pinned to the wall. It was a lavish estate in the Hamptons. Tents, gardens, a main ballroom. It was a stage set for a fairy tale. I was going to turn it into a courtroom. We are going to let the ceremony happen, I said, my voice hard. We are going to let him say his vows. We are going to let him think he got away with it. And then when he is standing at the reception raising a glass to his own brilliance, we are going to drop the hammer. I looked at my team. They were the best money could buy. They were loyal. They were dangerous. This is not just a job, I said. This is for my daughter. If any of you have reservations, leave now. No one moved. All right, I said. Let us get to work. We have 48 hours to build a trap that he cannot escape. I sat down and opened my laptop. I pulled up the floor plan. I began to mark the camera angles. I began to script the takedown. Blake wanted $200,000. I spent nearly that much to ensure his destruction. It was the best investment I ever made. The sun set outside, turning the sky a bruised purple. Inside the loft, the screens glowed with the data of Blake Sterling's life. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. I was compiling it all. I was not just a father anymore. I was the reckoning. And on Sunday, the bill was coming due. Saturday morning arrived with the tension of a bomb squad cutting the wrong wire. We were inside the Brooklyn loft and the air was thick with the heat of running servers and stale coffee. Chen sat at the main terminal, his face illuminated by 3 monitors cascading with hexadecimal code. He was 19 years old, wearing a hoodie that looked like it had not been washed in a week, but his fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist. I stood behind him, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. We were attempting to breach the internal server of Nia's company. It was not a simple hack. Nia was brilliant, and she had hired top-tier cybersecurity. Her firewall was a fortress. "We are hitting a biometric lock," Chen muttered, his eyes darting between screens. "The system wants a fingerprint or a retinal scan to access the financial sublevels. If I try to brute force it, the system will lock down and alert the admins." I leaned closer, my bruised ribs protesting the movement. "We do not need to break the lock, Chen. We need to trick it. Nia uses a legacy system for her archives. It is a backdoor she keeps open for older files. Look for port 8080. Chen typed furiously. His eyes widened. "It is there, but it is encrypted with a rolling key. Bypass it," I ordered. "Use the algorithm I gave you." The algorithm was a piece of code I had saved from a bust in 2010. It was old, but effective against specific types of encryption. Chen executed the command. The screen flashed red, then green. "We are in," Chen whispered. "Accessing the live ledger now." The screen filled with spreadsheets and transaction logs. It was a sea of numbers. To most people, it would look like noise. To me, it looked like a map. I scanned the columns, looking for the anomaly. I was looking for the ghost in the machine. Blake was smart, but he was arrogant. Arrogant men get lazy. They think no one is looking. "There," I said, pointing to a recurring transfer to a vendor listed as Summit Consulting. "Who are they?" Chen asked. "They do not exist," I said. "It is a shell. Drill down on that vendor ID." Chen typed the command. The vendor profile opened. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. The routing number led straight back to the same offshore betting syndicate we found earlier. "He is siphoning operating capital," I said, my voice cold. "He is bleeding the company dry to pay his bookie." Downloaded all I commanded. Every invoice, every transfer, every email associated with that account. The download bar started. 20%, 30%. Suddenly, a red warning light flashed on the screen. "Active trace," Chen hissed. "Someone is watching the network. The sysadmin is online." "Hold the connection," I said, gripping the back of his chair. "Do not disconnect until we have the files." "They are tracing the IP." Chen warned, sweat beading on his forehead. "They are going to burn our location." "Let them trace it," I said. "We are bouncing through a proxy in Russia. By the time they figure it out, we will be gone. Just get the files. 90%, 95. Done," Chen shouted, slamming the enter key and severing the connection. The screens went black. We sat there in the silence of the loft, breathing hard. We had the evidence. We had the proof of embezzlement. But the adrenaline crash was short-lived. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the motion sensor alert from my house in Queens. I checked the camera feed on my phone. A silver Porsche had just pulled into my driveway. "Blake." I looked at Sarah. "He is at my house. He is checking on me. I have to go," I said, grabbing my coat. "If I am not there, he will get suspicious. He will think I am up to something. I need to be the broken old man one last time." I drove back to Queens, breaking every speed limit on the expressway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had left some of the surveillance gear on my desk. If Blake saw the directional microphone or the files, he would know. He would know everything. I pulled into my driveway just as Blake was stepping out of his car. I parked the sedan crookedly, feigning a lack of coordination. I stumbled out of the car, clutching a pharmacy bag I had kept in the glove box for cover. "Blake," I wheezed, acting out of breath. "I didn't know you were coming." He looked at me with disdain. He looked at the pharmacy bag. "Where were you, old man?" he asked, walking up the path. "Picking up my pain medication," I said, pointing to my swollen eye. "It hurts, Blake. It hurts a lot." He smiled, a cruel satisfaction spreading across his face. "Good. It should hurt. Pain is a good teacher." He pushed past me into the house. My heart stopped. The study door was open. I had left the files on the desk. If he turned left, he would see them. "I need water." I groaned loudly, feigning a dizzy spell. I stumbled into the kitchen, knocking a chair over. The noise distracted him. He turned toward the kitchen instead of the study. "Jesus. Reggie, you are pathetic," he sneered, standing in the kitchen doorway. I grabbed a glass of water, my hands shaking intentionally. I drank it, spilling some down my chin. I looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Why are you here, Blake?" I asked. "Do you want more money?" I do not have any more. He laughed. I am just checking the merchandise, making sure you are still broken, making sure you are ready for the wedding. You are coming right. Nia expects you. I nodded quickly. Yes. Yes, I will be there. I will sit in the back. I will be quiet. Good, he said. He walked over to me and flicked my bruised cheek with his finger. Just remember who owns you, Reggie. One wrong move and I send those texts. He looked around the kitchen, sniffing the air. This place smells like old people and despair. I cannot wait to sell it. He turned and walked out. I followed him to the door, my posture stooped. I watched him get into his car and drive away. As soon as he turned the corner, I locked the door and sprinted to the study. I ignored the pain in my legs. I ran to the desk. The files were there right in the open, a stack of printouts showing his criminal record. If he had walked 3 more steps, he would have seen his own mugshot staring back at him. I collapsed into the chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour. That was too close. I looked at the laptop screen on my desk. Chen had sent over the decrypted files from the hack. I opened the folder labeled Summit Consulting. I began to scroll through the documents. Invoices for non-existent services, consulting fees, retainer agreements. It was a classic embezzlement scheme. But then I saw a file type that did not belong. It was a PDF labeled Collateral. I opened it. The document that loaded on the screen made my blood run cold. It was not a company document, it was personal. It was a loan agreement from a private lender, a shark. The amount was $500,000. The interest rate was usurious, but it was the collateral section that made me stop breathing. Listed as security for the loan was apartment 4B 120 West 81st Street. Nia's apartment, her home, the only thing she owned outright. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a signature, Nia Carter. I stared at it. I knew my daughter's signature. I had seen it on birthday cards and report cards for 28 years. This looked like her signature. It had the loop on the C and the sharp T. But I was a forensic accountant. I knew ink. I knew pressure points. I zoomed in on the signature. The lines were too uniform. There was no variation in the stroke width. It was a digital trace, a forgery. Blake had forged her signature to mortgage her home to a loan shark. He wasn't just stealing her cash, he had literally sold the roof over her head. If he defaulted, and he was definitely going to default, the sharks would come for the apartment. Nia would be homeless. This was the smoking gun. This was the nuclear option. Embezzlement was white-collar crime. Forging a mortgage document was fraud on a level that carried a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. I printed the document. The printer whirred, a mechanical sound of justice being manufactured. I held the warm paper in my hands. You went too far, Blake, I whispered. You touched her home. I looked at the time. The wedding was tomorrow. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. Tell Jackson to prep the gear, I said. We have the kill shot. The estate in the Hamptons was a sprawling monument to excess. White tents peaked like snow-capped mountains against the blue summer sky. The lawn was manicured to within a millimeter of its life, a green carpet that probably cost more to maintain than my entire pension. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, a fleet of Ferraris that looked like spilled candy. It was a gathering of the 1%, the masters of the universe. And today they were all gathered to celebrate a fraud. I walked up the long gravel driveway. My shoes crunched on the white stones. I wore my same gray suit, but I had pressed it the night before. I wanted to look respectable. I wanted to look like a father. But to the people passing me in their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, I looked like the help. I saw the glances, the quick assessments, the dismissal. They saw a black man in a cheap suit and assumed I was parking cars or serving drinks. The air smelled of sea salt and expensive orchids. Thousands of white orchids imported from Thailand draped every surface. I did the math in my head. At $50 a stem plus shipping and labor, the floral budget alone was north of $75,000. That was Nia's money. That was the equity in her apartment. Every petal was paid for with a lie. I reached the main entrance of the tent. It was guarded by 2 men who looked like linebackers squeezed into polyester suits. They were not the usual event staff. They were private security, Blake's security. He had hired them specifically for me. I stepped forward. One of the guards, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped into my path. He did not speak. He just crossed his arms. His message was clear. You do not belong here. I am the father of the bride, I said, keeping my voice calm. The guard looked down at a tablet. He scrolled slowly, deliberately wasting time. Name, he grunted. Reginald Carter. He scrolled again. Not on the list. I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. This was part of the game. Blake wanted to humiliate me. He wanted me to cause a scene so he could justify throwing me out. Check again, I said, or call the groom. Tell him the investor has arrived. The guard hesitated. The word investor changed the dynamic. Money talks even to hired muscle. He tapped his earpiece and muttered something. A moment later, Nia appeared. She looked breathtaking. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk. She wore diamonds in her ears, but her eyes were red. She had been crying. She saw me and her face fell. It was a look of pure exhaustion. Daddy, she sighed, walking past the guards. I told you not to come if you were going to cause trouble. I am not here to cause trouble. Nia, I said, holding up my hands. I am here to walk you down the aisle. I am here to make peace. She looked at my black eye. She looked at the cut on my lip. She flinched. You cannot walk me down the aisle looking like that, she whispered. Everyone will ask questions. Blake is already upset. He says you threatened him again this morning. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I threatened him. That was rich. I just want to see you get married, baby, I said, softening my voice. I will stay in the back. I will be invisible. Please. She hesitated. She looked back at the tent where the guests were taking their seats. She was torn between her anger and her love. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but you sit in the back. Table 42. It is behind the main pillar. And do not speak to anyone. Do not go near Blake. If you say one word to him, security will remove you. Do you understand? I understand, I said. She turned and walked away. She did not hug me. She did not smile. She walked back into the fantasy she had bought with her own stolen money. I walked past the guard. He stepped aside, but his eyes followed me. I made my way to the back of the tent. Table 42 was empty. It was the table for the vendors, the photographer's assistant, the DJ's girlfriend. I sat down. The pillar blocked my view of the center aisle, but I had a clear line of sight to the altar. The music started. A string quartet began to play something classical and expensive. The guests hushed. The ceremony was beginning. Blake walked out first. He stood at the altar, waiting. He looked like a movie star. His tuxedo fits perfectly. His hair was slicked back. He smiled at the crowd, a charming, humble smile that fooled everyone. Everyone except me. He scanned the room. His eyes were not looking for his bride. They were looking for me. He spotted me in the back shadows. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed. He made a subtle movement with his hand. He rubbed his thumb against his index finger. The universal sign for money. Pay up. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had prepared a screenshot earlier. It was a fake confirmation page from a banking app. It showed a transfer of $200,000 to the wallet address he had given me. It looked authentic. The font was perfect. The timestamp was current. I held the phone up. I knew he couldn't read the screen from that distance, but he could see the green checkmark graphic I had enlarged. I nodded once, a slow, deliberate movement of submission. Done, I mouthed. Blake saw it. His shoulders dropped an inch. The tension left his body. He let out a breath he had probably been holding since he woke up. He believed it. He believed he had won. He believed the money was in his account, cleaning up his mess, saving his skin. He winked at me. A quick, arrogant wink. It was a victory lap. He turned his attention back to the aisle just as the music swelled and Nia appeared. I put the phone back in my pocket. My hand brushed against the remote control for the venue's AV system, which Chen had synced to a dedicated frequency. Enjoy the moment, Blake, I thought. It is the last happy moment of your life. The ceremony proceeded. Vows were exchanged. Rings were slipped onto fingers. I watched it all with a detachment that frightened me. I was watching my daughter marry a monster, and I did not stand up to object. I sat still. I waited. Because stopping the wedding was not enough. An annulment was just paperwork. I needed an exorcism. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. They kissed. The crowd cheered. Blake pumped his fist in the air, the triumphant hero. They walked back up the aisle together, smiling, waving. Nia looked relieved. She thought the drama was over. She thought her father had capitulated. I watched them exit the tent, heading toward the main house for photos. The guests began to move toward the bar. I stood up. I checked my watch. We had 30 minutes before the reception speeches began. 30 minutes before the screens came down. I tapped my earpiece. "Sarah, are we green?" "Green, Reggie," she replied. "The FBI is holding position at the main gate. Jackson and Miller are inside. We are ready when you are." I adjusted my tie. I walked toward the main stage. The security guard started to move toward me, but I shot him a look so cold, so full of promise of violence that he hesitated. "I am just getting a drink," I said. I walked past him. I was not getting a drink. I was getting into position. The groom wanted a toast. I was going to give him a roast he would never forget. The reception was a masterpiece of deception. The sun had set, leaving the white tent glowing like a lantern against the dark Hampton sky. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of expensive perfume and roast lamb. Blake Sterling stood on the raised stage holding a microphone like it was a scepter. He looked perfect. His tuxedo was sharp, his hair was flawless, and his smile was dazzling. He raised a glass of vintage champagne. The room went silent. 150 guests, the elite of Manhattan society, turned their faces toward him. He began to speak. His voice was smooth like poured honey. He talked about destiny. He talked about the first time he saw Nia. He spun a fairy tale about two souls finding each other in a chaotic world. He looked down at the head table where Nia sat wiping a tear from her eye. She looked up at him with pure adoration. She believed him. She believed every lie. Hell. The guests applauded softly. Women sighed. Men nodded in approval. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I stood in the shadows near the soundboard, my back against a support beam. I watched him. I watched the way he paused for effect. I watched the way he made eye contact with the wealthiest investors in the room. He thought he had won. He thought the $200,000 was sitting in his crypto wallet ready to wash away his sins. He raised his glass one last time. To Nia, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "My partner, my life, my everything." The crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. It was the peak of his triumph. The moment he had been working toward for months. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold plastic of the remote trigger. I looked at the sound engineer who was busy texting on his phone, oblivious to the hijacking of his system. I tapped my earpiece 3 times. "Now, Chen, drop the hammer." The applause died down. Blake lowered the microphone, ready to step off the stage and accept his congratulations. Suddenly the speakers crackled. A high-pitched digital shriek pierced the air. Guests covered their ears, wincing. Blake frowned, tapping the microphone. "Is this thing on?" he joked, trying to recover the mood. Then the sound changed. It was not feedback. It was a recording, crystal clear, amplified by 10,000 watts of power. "Nia is an idiot," the voice boomed through the ballroom. It was Blake's voice, but it was not the smooth, polished tone he used for his toast. It was the raw, hateful snarl from the storage unit. It was the voice of a man who despised the woman he was marrying. The room froze. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the tent. Blake went pale. He looked around confused, searching for the source. "She thinks I am some financial genius. She has no idea I am using her credit to keep the lights on." The recording continued, relentless and loud. "Even after I spend every dime of this, she will still marry me, because I am her dream." Nia stood up slowly. Her movements were jerky and uncoordinated. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the dance floor. The sound was lost under the booming voice of her husband-to-be. She stared at the speakers, then at Blake, her face a mask of confusion and horror. "And you are just her embarrassing past. You are nothing but a sad old black man." The racial slur hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The wealthy white guests gasped. This was not just a private insult. It was a public exposure of his true character. The polite facade of the evening cracked wide open. "After the wedding, I am going to sell your house. I am going to put you in a state-run home, and I am going to make sure you rot there." The recording ended with the sickening thud of his fist hitting my face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Blake stood on the stage, paralyzed. The microphone was still in his hand, trembling violently. For the first time all night he looked small. He looked like a rat caught in a spotlight. The silence broke. It shattered into 1,000 whispers. People turned to each other, mouths open, eyes wide. The shock was physical. Blake recovered first. His survival instinct kicked in. He shouted into the live microphone, his voice shrill. "Turn it off! Cut the sound!" He pointed at the sound engineer who was frantically pushing buttons that did not work because Chen had locked the system from Brooklyn. "That is not me," Blake yelled, his face slick with sweat. "That is fake. It is a deep fake. It is AI." He jumped off the stage and ran toward Nia. He tried to grab her hands, but she flinched away from him. "Nia, baby, listen to me," he pleaded. "Your father did this. He hired someone to generate that voice. It is a computer program. I warned you about this. I never said those things. You know I love you." Nia looked at him. She looked terrified. Her mind was trying to reconcile the man she loved with the monster on the tape. The cognitive dissonance was tearing her apart. "It sounded just like you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It is technology," Blake screamed. He was losing control. The charm was gone, replaced by manic desperation. "He spent all his money to frame me. He is jealous. He is trying to ruin us." He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide, trying to regain command of the room. "Everyone, please. This is a sick joke by a sick old man. Please ignore it. Let us continue the celebration." But they were not ignoring it. They were pulling out their phones. They were recording. The elite of New York society loves a scandal, and this was the main course. They smelled blood. Nia looked around the room, looking for an exit, looking for safety. Her eyes frantically scanned the crowd until they found mine in the shadows. "Daddy," she mouthed. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I walked toward the dance floor. I did not limp. I did not hunch. I walked with the stride of a man who had kicked down doors for a living. "It is not AI, Blake," I said, my voice projecting across the silent room without a microphone. "And I did not pay a computer to punch me in the face." I pointed to my black eye, swollen and ugly under the ballroom lights. "You did that. Yesterday. In Unit 42. Blake spun around. He saw me, and in his eyes I saw the realization that the game was rigged. But he still thought he had one card left to play. He still thought he could lie his way out. He did not know about the screens. Blake tried to shout over the murmurs of the crowd, claiming again that technology was hijacking his life, but I signaled Chen one more time. The massive LED screens behind the stage, the ones meant to display a slideshow of the happy couple's childhood photos, suddenly flickered black. A second later, they illuminated the room with a harsh white light. It was not a slideshow of memories. It was a slideshow of crimes. The first image was a bank statement. It was blown up to 10 feet tall, so even the guests in the back row could read the fine print. It showed the accounts of Summit Consulting, the shell company Blake used to embezzle funds from Nia's business. Next to it was a split screen showing the corresponding deposits into the offshore betting syndicate in Costa Rica. Red lines connected the two, linking the theft directly to the gambling debt. The numbers were staggering. $300,000 siphoned in 6 months. The room gasped collectively. These were financial people. They understood what they were seeing. They recognized the anatomy of fraud instantly. The image changed. Now it was a flight itinerary, a boarding pass. The name on the ticket was Blake Sterling. The destination was Grand Cayman. The date was tonight at 11:30 p.m., a one-way ticket. There was no ticket for Nia. The implication hit the room like a physical wave. He was leaving her. He was going to cut the cake kiss, the bride steal her money, and board a plane before the reception ended. Nia stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a devastation that went beyond heartbreak. She saw the empty seat next to him. She saw her abandonment booked in first class. Then the final video played. It was the footage from the button camera in Unit 42. It was high definition and brutal. It showed me handing Blake the bag. It showed him pulling the chrome pistol from his waistband. It showed the sneer on his face as he called me a rat. And then it showed the punch. The camera jerked violently as his fist connected with my face. The sound of the impact was amplified through the speakers, a wet, sickening crunch. The video ended with him kicking me while I was down. The ballroom was silent as a tomb. The violence on the screen was undeniable. It was not AI. It was raw human cruelty. The guests looked from the screen to Blake, then to my battered face. The connection was made. The charm was stripped away, leaving only the thug beneath the tuxedo. Blake stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had hit me, now shaking uncontrollably. He knew there was no spin that could fix this. I walked toward him. I moved out of the shadows of the pillar and into the center of the dance floor. The spotlight that had been following the couple now swung to me, finding me in the center of the room. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. I straightened my back. I rolled my shoulders back, dropping the stoop I had affected for weeks. I lifted my chin. The transformation was subtle but profound. The tired old mechanic from Queens evaporated. In his place stood the man who had stared down cartel bosses and corrupt senators for 25 years. The man who knew how to hold a room not with volume, but with presence. I looked at the crowd. I saw the confusion turning into respect. They saw the suit was cheap, but the man inside it was made of iron. I looked at Nia. She was looking at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. She saw the father who had protected her from nightmares when she was a child now protecting her from a nightmare in real life. I turned my gaze to Blake. He was still on the stage, but he looked smaller now. He looked like a child wearing his father's clothes. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "Who are you?" he whispered. His voice picked up by the live microphone. "You are just a mechanic. You fix lawnmowers." I smiled. It was a cold smile. The smile of a hunter who has trapped the wolf. "I am a mechanic, Blake," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "But I did not always fix machines. For 25 years I fixed problems. I fixed balance sheets. I fixed discrepancies. I was a forensic accountant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The revelation rippled through the crowd. Whispers broke out. Blake flinched as if I had slapped him. I spent my career hunting men who thought they were smarter than the system. I continued taking a step closer. Men who thought a suit and a smile could hide a crime. I tracked money through shell companies in Panama and diamond mines in Africa. I know how to follow a dollar bill through a hurricane. And you, Blake, you were easy. You were sloppy. You left fingerprints on everything you touched. Blake backed away until he hit the DJ booth. His eyes darted around the room looking for an escape route, looking for a friend. He found neither. The security guards I had hired, Jackson and Miller, stepped out from the curtains, blocking the exits. They stood with their arms crossed, stone-faced and imposing. The guests had formed a semicircle around the stage, creating a human wall. He was trapped in the center of his own lavish party. He looked at me, desperation clawing at his throat. He tried to play his last card, the only card he thought he had left. The money, he stammered. "The transfer. You sent it. I saw the confirmation. I have $200,000. I can pay everyone back. It was a loan. I can fix this." He pulled out his phone, frantically tapping the screen, trying to bring up his crypto wallet, trying to show the world he was solvent. He needed that money to be real. If the money was real, he could maybe bargain. He could maybe run. I watched him struggle with the app. I watched the color drain from his face as the screen loaded. "Check the balance, Blake," I said softly. He stared at his phone. He swiped down to refresh. He swiped again. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. "It is zero," he whispered. "It is zero. But you showed me. You showed me the confirmation." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. I held it up. I showed you a graphic design, Blake. I showed you a picture. I did not transfer $200,000 to your wallet. I took another step toward the stage, closing the distance until I was looking up at him. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was hanging on the next words. "I did not transfer the money," I said, my voice ringing out like a gavel. "I transferred the file." Blake looked confused. "What file?" "The file containing the evidence of your embezzlement, your identity theft, the forged mortgage on Nia's apartment, and the assault on a federal officer," I said. "I transferred it 10 minutes ago." "To who?" he gasped. "To the FBI field office in New York," I said. As if on cue, the sound of sirens cut through the night air. Not one siren. Dozens. They were getting louder, coming up the long driveway, screaming toward the tent. Blue and red lights began to flash against the white canvas walls of the tent, turning the wedding reception into a crime scene. Blake looked at the lights. He looked at me. He looked at Nia, who was now standing next to me, her face a mask of cold fury. His world collapsed. The money was gone. The girl was gone. The freedom was gone. He let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud that signaled the end of the show. The sirens stopped right outside. Car doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. "Run, Blake," I said. "Why do you not try to run? I want to see you try." But he could not run. His legs gave out. He sank to his knees on the stage, surrounded by white orchids paid for with stolen money weeping into his hands as the heavy footsteps of federal agents thundered toward the entrance. The sirens stopped just outside the tent. Then came the sound of heavy doors slamming and boots hitting the pavement. It was not a chaotic rush like in the movies. It was the rhythmic thumping of a synchronized assault. The main entrance of the tent flew open. "Federal agents, everybody down!" The command was shouted by a dozen voices at once. A tactical team swept into the ballroom, moving with the fluid precision of a river breaching a dam. They wore raid jackets emblazoned with FBI in yellow letters. They carried carbines at the low ready, scanning the crowd for threats. The guests screamed and dropped to the floor, covering their heads. The waiters dove under the tables. The illusion of the high society wedding evaporated instantly, replaced by the stark reality of a federal takedown. I watched the lead agent enter. It was Special Agent Perkins. I had trained him at Quantico 15 years ago. He looked older now, gray at the temples, but his eyes were the same, cold, sharp, assessing. He spotted me standing near the dance floor and gave me a microscopic nod. He knew the landscape. He knew who the bad guy was. Blake Sterling. Perkins announced, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and aggravated identity theft. Get on your knees and put your hands behind your head." The agents fanned out, securing the perimeter. Jackson and Miller. My private security team raised their hands, slowly stepping back to allow the Bureau to take control. They knew the drill. This was the big leagues now. The room smelled of fear and ozone. The party was over. The crime scene had begun. Blake looked at the agents closing in on him. He looked at the handcuffs swinging from Perkins' belt. He looked at the exits blocked by armored men. He looked at the screens still displaying the evidence of his crimes. His face went through a rapid transformation. The shock vanished. The fear vanished. In their place came a look of pure, unadulterated madness. He realized there was no way out. He realized his life as a golden boy was over. He was looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. He snapped. He did not get on his knees. Instead, he lunged to his left. Nia was standing there, paralyzed by shock, staring at the man she had just married. She did not see him move until it was too late. Blake grabbed her arm and yanked her backward. She screamed a high, thin sound of terror. He spun her around, slamming her back against his chest. His other hand grabbed the silver cake knife from the table beside the towering wedding cake. It was a long, serrated blade meant for cutting fondant, but sharp enough to open a throat. "Back off," he screamed, pressing the blade against the soft skin of Nia's neck. "Stay back, or I swear to God I will kill her." The agents froze. Their weapons snapped up, trained on Blake's center mass, but they could not fire. Nia was a human shield. Her white wedding dress was a stark contrast to Blake's black tuxedo, making her an easy target, but making him almost impossible to hit without risking her. "Blake, please," Nia whimpered, clutching at the arm that was choking her. "You are hurting me." "Shut up," he roared, tightening his grip. "This is your fault. You let him do this. You let your father ruin everything." He looked at me, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Saliva flew from his mouth as he screamed, "You want her back, Reggie. You want your precious daughter. Then get me a car." He turned his attention to Perkins. "I want a car and a clear path to the airstrip. I am taking her with me. If I see one cop follow us, she dies. Do you hear me? She dies." He was not bluffing. I had seen this look before in the eyes of cartel hitmen and cornered bank robbers. He had nothing left to lose. Taking a life did not matter to him anymore. He was going to use my daughter as a bargaining chip or a final act of revenge. The guests were screaming, huddled under tables. The agents held their positions, their fingers tense on the triggers. It was a standoff. And in a standoff, time is the enemy. Every second that passed, Blake's adrenaline would spike higher. His hand would shake more. The knife would dig deeper. I did not wait for Perkins to negotiate. I did not wait for a sniper team that was not there. I stepped forward. I moved slowly, deliberately, drawing Blake's attention away from the agents and onto me. "Let her go, Blake," I said, my voice calm and low. "It is over. You did this," he screamed, shifting the knife slightly. "You old piece of trash. I should have killed you in that storage unit. You tried," I said, "and you failed." My hand moved to the small of my back. It was a smooth, practiced motion. I did not fumble. I gripped the textured rubber handle of the Smith & Wesson Model 36, the snub-nosed revolver I had carried as a backup piece since 1985. It was old. It was heavy. and I knew exactly how it fired. Blake saw the movement. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Drop it!" he shrieked, pressing the knife harder against Nia's throat. "Drop the gun, or I cut her." He tried to tuck his head behind Nia's shoulder, using her body as cover. He was a coward to the end, but he made a mistake, a critical tactical error. In his panic to shield his head, he shifted his weight. He exposed his right shoulder, the one holding the knife. It was a small target, a 3-inch window of black fabric moving erratically. At 20 feet with a short barrel pistol, it was a shot most agents would not take. It was a shot that required perfection. If I missed, I could hit Nia. If I hit him in the wrong place, he might reflexively slash her throat as he fell. But I was not most agents. I was the range master at Quantico for 3 years. I had fired 50,000 rounds through this specific gun. I did not need to aim. I pointed. It is called instinctive shooting. You look at the target and your hand follows your eye. I exhaled. The world slowed down. The screaming faded. The lights dimmed. All I saw was the junction of his shoulder and his collarbone. I squeezed the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. A roar that shook the tent poles. Blake screamed. His right shoulder exploded in a mist of red. The impact of the heavy .38 caliber slug spun him around like a rag doll. The knife clattered to the floor, sliding across the dance floor. His grip on Nia broke instantly. He fell backward, clutching his shattered shoulder, writhing on the stage. Nia stumbled forward, free, gasping for air, her hands flying to her neck. I lowered the gun. I did not shake. I did not look away. Perkins and his team swarmed the stage. They were on Blake in seconds, kicking his legs apart, cuffing his good hand and his bad one behind his back. "Target secure," Perkins yelled. "Suspect down." I engaged the safety on my revolver and placed it on the floor. I raised my hand slowly, showing the agents I was clear. "Nice shot," Reggie Perkins said as he ran past me toward the suspect. I did not answer. I just looked at my daughter standing alone in the center of the chaos, safe at last. The smoke from the barrel drifted up into the lights, mingling with the scent of orchids and gunpowder. The chaos of the arrest was a spectacle of raw, unfiltered rage. Blake Sterling lay on the stage, pinned by 3 federal agents, his face pressed into the polished wood floor. He was not going quietly. The pain from his shoulder had stripped away the last remnants of his cultivated charm, leaving only a cornered animal. He screamed. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a torrent of hate. "You people," he shrieked, spitting blood onto the shoes of an agent. "You are all the same. You think you can take what is mine. I built this. I deserve this." He looked up, searching for a sympathetic face in the crowd. He found none. The wealthy guests, the investors, the socialites, they all stared back with expressions of revulsion. They had tolerated his ambition, but they would not tolerate his failure. And they certainly would not tolerate the vile, racist slurs that began to pour from his mouth as the agents hauled him to his feet. He called me names that had not been heard in polite society since the 1950s. He called the agents traitors to their race. He called Nia a fool. He burned every bridge he had ever built, dousing them in the gasoline of his own bigotry. It was the final exposure. The man who had charmed them all was revealed to be nothing but a hateful, hollow shell. "Get him out of here," Perkins ordered, his voice tight with disgust. They dragged Blake toward the exit. He kicked and thrashed, a broken man screaming at a world that had finally seen through his mask. The flashing lights of the patrol cars swallowed him whole, and then he was gone, leaving behind only the echo of his hate and the ruin of a wedding that never should have happened. I stood by the stage watching him go. My adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary ache. I holstered my revolver. I adjusted my jacket, trying to cover the blood stain on my shirt where Blake's fist had split my lip the day before. Then I felt a hand on my arm. It was small and trembling. I turned. Nia stood there. Her wedding dress was torn at the shoulder where Blake had grabbed her. Her makeup was streaked with tears. She looked like a ghost in the wreckage of a fairy tale. "Daddy," she whispered. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months. She saw the black eye, she saw the split lip, and then her eyes traveled down. My shirt had come untucked during the confrontation, exposing the dark purple bruising across my ribs where Blake had kicked me in the storage unit. It was an ugly mark, a map of violence painted on my skin. Nia gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering a sob. She reached out and touched the bruise, her fingers light as a feather. He did that, she choked out. He hurt you. I buttoned my jacket covering the injury. It is nothing, baby, just a scratch. No, she cried, shaking her head violently. It is not nothing. You told me he beat you and I called you a liar. I defended him. I let him into my life. I let him hurt you. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Her body shook with the force of her grief and guilt. I held her tight, just like I used to when she was a little girl and woke up from a bad dream. I stroked her hair, smelling the expensive hairspray and the lingering scent of fear. I am so sorry, Daddy. She wept into my chest. I am so sorry. I was so stupid. I was so blind. How can you ever forgive me? I looked over her head at the empty ballroom. The guests were leaving quietly, escorted by the agents. The waiters were clearing the untouched food. The fantasy was dead, but my daughter was alive. There is nothing to forgive, Nia, I said softly. She pulled back, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. How can you say that? I chose him over you. I treated you like garbage. You were in love, I said, wiping a tear from her cheek with my thumb. Love makes us do foolish things. It makes us see what we want to see. Blake was a professional liar, Nia. He fooled banks. He fooled investors. Do not beat yourself up for being human. But you knew, she said. You knew, and I didn't listen. I knew, because I have seen evil before I said. You haven't, and I hope you never see it again. I looked around at the ruins of the party, the overturned chairs, the smashed cake, the police tape being strung across the stage. This is a mess, I said, trying to lighten the mood. But at least we saved the catering bill. I think Perkins is going to impound the lobster. Nia let out a small, watery laugh. It was a weak sound, but it was a start. She hugged me again tighter this time. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for saving my life. I kissed the top of her head. I am your father, Nia, I said. Saving you is my job description. It does not have an expiration date. We stood there in the center of the empty dance floor, a father and daughter reunited in the debris of a disaster. The music had stopped. The lights were harsh. But for the first time in a long time, the air between us was clear. No lies, no secrets, just the truth. Let us go home, I said. I think we both need some ice. Nia nodded, taking my arm. Yes. Let us go home. We walked out of the tent, leaving the wreckage of Blake Sterling's life behind us. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The stars were shining above the Hamptons, indifferent to the drama of men. We walked to my old sedan. It looked out of place among the luxury cars, but it was reliable. It was real, just like us. 6 months later, the world looked different. The frantic energy of the city seemed slower, calmer, more manageable. I sat on a weathered wooden dock overlooking a small lake in upstate New York. The water was still reflecting the fiery orange of the autumn leaves. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Next to me sat Nia. She wore jeans and a thick wool sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She held a fishing rod, her eyes focused on the bobber floating on the surface. She looked younger. The stress lines that had defined her face during her engagement were gone, replaced by a quiet strength. We had spent the morning like this in comfortable silence. No phones, no emails, just the sound of the wind and the occasional splash of a fish. It was a ritual we had not shared since she was 12 years old. Back then, she would chatter endlessly about school and friends. Now she was content just to be. Nia reeled in her line, checking the bait. The lawyers called yesterday, she said, her voice breaking the stillness. It is done. The judge signed the order. I have full control of the company again. I nodded, watching a dragonfly hover over the water. That is good news, baby. And the audit? Clean, she said. Sarah's forensic team did an incredible job. They traced every cent Blake stole. We recovered about 70% of the embezzled funds from the betting syndicate's frozen accounts. The rest, well, the insurance will cover most of it. But the reputation damage is healing. Clients are coming back. They respect that we cleaned house. She cast her line again, the lure landing with a soft plop. I am suing the bank too, she added, a hint of steel in her voice, for allowing a forged signature on a mortgage application. They settled out of court this morning. The apartment is safe, Daddy. No one is taking my home. I smiled. She had learned. She had walked through the fire and come out forged in steel. She was not just a victim anymore. She was a survivor. She was a fighter. And Blake? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sarah kept me updated daily. Nia's face hardened. 25 years, she said. Federal prison. No parole for at least 20. The judge threw the book at him. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, assault on a federal officer, and attempted kidnapping. She looked at me, her eyes soft. He cried at the sentencing, she said. He tried to blame his addiction. He tried to blame his upbringing, but the judge just looked at the video of him hitting you. She told him that a man who hits an elder is not a victim, he is a predator. Justice, I said simply. Yes, she said. Justice. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you, Daddy, for everything, for the money, for the protection, for waiting for me to wake up. I kissed her forehead. I would do it again, I said, in a heartbeat. The sun began to dip below the tree line, casting long shadows across the lake. We packed up our gear. We hadn't caught any fish, but that was never the point. As we walked back to the cabin, I stopped and looked out over the water one last time. I thought about the journey, the lies, the violence, the fear. It had been a war. A war fought not with soldiers, but with information, with patience, with love. People say you cannot choose your family. They say blood is thicker than water. But they are wrong. You choose your family every day by how you treat them, by how you protect them, by the sacrifices you make when no one is watching. Blake Sterling thought he could steal a family. He thought he could buy loyalty with stolen money. He thought he could break the bond between a father and daughter with lies. He was wrong. He underestimated the power of a father's love. He underestimated the resolve of a man who has nothing left to lose but his child. I am Reginald Carter. I am 70 years old. I am a mechanic. I am a federal agent. But above all, I am a father. And I do not retire from that job. Not ever. I watched Nia walk ahead of me, her step, lighter head held high. She was safe. She was free. And she was mine. I adjusted my fishing gear on my shoulder and followed her home. The war was over. The peace had just begun. And it was beautiful. We often believe that evil looks like a monster, but sometimes it wears a tuxedo and smiles like a movie star. Nia's story is a brutal reminder that success and charm can be the most dangerous masks of all. True family isn't about who says, "I love you," the loudest. It's about who stands by you when the world is burning. Never let anyone isolate you from your roots or put a price tag on your affection. And if your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. It might be the only warning you get before the trap snaps shut. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and redemption. Have you ever had to protect a loved one from a toxic partner? Tell me your story in the comments below.